Tonight, let's go to the book of Joshua and chapter number 11. Joshua 11. And go to Joshua 11, look with me in verse 15. Joshua 11, beginning in verse 15. As the Lord commanded Moses his servant, so did Moses command Joshua, and so did Joshua. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded Moses. So Joshua took all that land, the hills and the south country, and all the land of Goshen, and the valley, and the plain, and the mountain of Israel, and the valley of the same, even from the Mount Halak that goeth up to Seir, even unto Baal Gad, in the valley of Lebanon, under Mount Hermon. And all their kings he took and smote them and slew them. Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. And let's pray. Thank you, Lord, tonight for our evening service. Thank you for our church and your working in it. Thank you for these people that have come, Lord, to hear from your word tonight, to meet with us. And I pray you'd bless them. Bless them for showing up. Bless them for being ready to hear. And you said, Lord, in your Bible, Lord, if those that hunger and thirst for righteousness, they'll be filled. And I pray you'd fill them tonight. And if there is any that still are here but lack that hunger and thirst, I pray you would create that thirst in them for thee, for righteousness, for the Lord Jesus Christ, the righteous. So teach us, exhort us, rebuke, reprove, instruct, and give us what we need in these moments, I pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Back toward the end of July, I was reading through the book of Joshua, and when I was doing that, I made some notes for a future message on some things that stuck out to me there when I read Joshua 11 and verse number 16. Reading through there, chapter 11, reading verse 16, some things stuck out, and I stopped and made some notes, like I'll do from time to time, about a message I might preach in the future. And as I was contemplating what to preach on the Sunday night after revival meeting, this is looking through. This is what I was settling on. This thing right here that we're going to look at tonight. It stuck out to me as being right on point for what we need after revival meeting. I knew some of the thoughts I had concerning the message that I had. They'd shown up in other messages from time to time. So I also made a note with those notes to check some of my previous sermon notes regarding that. And when I did, I found that I had actually preached an entire message on the subject about almost 10 and a half years ago, in April of 2013, early April. So anyway, I drew from those notes and I incorporated them with my current thoughts. I'm going to preach to you about that subject tonight that we're going to find as we look in Joshua chapter 11 and then verse number 16. And I'll zero in on that and give it to you here in just a moment. But let me say this first. What we're going to discover in Joshua 11, verse 16 are three things that I think picture the three main possible states of a Christian. And there may be some that you might find some in-between things and so on and so forth. But these are really descriptive and really illustrative of the three main possible states of a Christian that he might be in at any given time during his life. And so those three things, we're going to find them in Joshua 11:16, but they are this: the mountain, the valley, and the plain. The mountain, the valley, and the plain. That's what I want to preach to you about tonight. Notice those three elements as we read in Joshua 11:16. So Joshua took all that land, the hills and all the south country, and all the land of Goshen, and the valley, and the plain, and the mountain of Israel, and the valley of the same. So you see those three things in there in a different order than I gave them to you, but you see the valley, and you see the plain, and you see the mountain, all showing up there in one verse. Now this is not the only time in the Bible that they show up all in one verse. Matter of fact, early on in the chapter 11, they all show up in a verse. Go back to verse 1, leading into this. Joshua 11:1. He starts off the chapter and says, "And it came to pass when Jabin, king of Hazor, had heard those things, that he sent to Jobab, king of Madon, and to the king of Shimron, and to the king of Achshaph, and to the kings that were on the north of the mountains, and of the plains south of Chinneroth, and in the valley, in the borders of Dor on the west." Of course, all these things described various landscapes, mountains, earth protruding out of the ground upward, valleys, a lack of earth as things go downward, and plains, flat, and just going straight toward the horizon. The earth looking like that. And so you've got all three of those things here in Joshua chapter 11 and verse number 2 as well. And then go to chapter 12. You've got them there again in Joshua chapter 12. Joshua 12, starting in verse 7. 12:7, and these are the kings of the country which Joshua and the children of Israel smote on this side Jordan on the west, from Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon, even unto the Mount Halak, that go up to Seir, which Joshua gave unto the tribes of Israel for a possession according to their divisions. You got two of them in verse 7, but all three are in verse 8. And he talks about them, these people that he's going in to possess this land in the mountains and in the valleys and in the plains. And so these possessions that they got when they went and got the promised land, they included all three of those things. The promised land included mountains, valleys, and plains. So he says in the mountains and in the valleys and in the plains, and he goes on with some other things as well. But those three things right there, and that's the order I'm going to give them to you in tonight as we find them in Joshua 12 verse 8. There they are. Now, there's another one as well. Let's go, and we'll be expounding on these thoughts, but let's go back to Deuteronomy, right before Joshua, but go all the way back to the beginning of Deuteronomy chapter number 1. We're going to find these elements in Deuteronomy chapter 1, although it won't read exactly the same, mountains, valley, and plains, but they're all going to be there. We'll have an abbreviation for a couple of them. Deuteronomy 1 verse 7. The Lord says to his people, turn you and take your journey and go to the mount of the Amorites. There's your mountain. And unto all the places nigh thereunto in the plain. There's that one. And in the plain, in the hills, and in the vale. In the vale. Vale is a shortened form of the word valley. A vale, as he talks about it right here, V-A-L-E, is a valley. And so you have all three of them here in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse number 7 as well. And they're to go to those places in the plain, in the hills, and in the vale, and in the south, and by the seaside, to the land of the Canaanites, and unto Lebanon, unto the great river, the river Euphrates. So again, they're taking their journey, heading toward the promised land. The promised land includes all of these things. Their journey includes all of these things. That's what he said there in verse 7, Deuteronomy chapter 1. Take your journey and go to. And when they go to, it's going to include the mountain, it's going to include the valley, and it's going to include the plains. The Lord sends them to all three of those places. And with that in mind, let me say at the outset of this message, whether you're in the mountain, and you know what we apply these things spiritually, especially mountain and valley. But whether you're in the mountain, whether you're in the valley, or whether you're in the plain, it's all good. I mean, God sends you there. It's part of your journey. Whatever part you're in, all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. So God has something for you in each of those places. So it's good because the Lord's leading you there. It's good because he is with you there, and the Lord knows what he's doing. We don't always know what he's doing right away. That's where faith comes in. And are we not supposed to walk by faith, not by sight? Well, how often do we? We start opening our eyes and we start seeing the giants in our own life. And we want to back down and back off and turn tail and run like the children of Israel did, whom we chide for doing that instead of going into the promised land and conquering like God told them to do. But these are good places. The mountain, the valley, the plain, they're all part of your journey. You can find God in each one of those places. Each one of those places has lessons to teach. Each one of those places has particular benefits. And each one of those places has particular liabilities. And so let's start then, as I said we would, let's start with the mountain. And look, this is the one we all love. That's faith. We all love mountaintop experiences. We talk about mountaintop experiences. We're talking about, like in Isaiah 58, where the Lord makes us to ride upon the high places of the earth. I mean, we're hitting on all cylinders. The presence of God is thick. Mountaintop experience spiritually would be like when they were dedicating the temple and they were singing, and the glory of God filled that place to the point where the priest could not even minister by reason of the glory of God. I've been in some services at times when the glory kind of got like that. It kind of like rolled in there, and then the shout kind of took over and the excitement took over. And there's been times when the preacher just had to pause. He had to put it on pause because there was no sense in trying to preach at that time because it just there's just too much else going on. And you had to kind of let that thing calm down and then get back to the preaching. And we love things like that. And they come in various shapes, sizes, varieties, and forms. But the mountaintop, let's face it, it's a good time. We love living our lives on the mountain. There's nothing like the mountaintop experiences of the Christian life. I'll testify, I love them. They are great. And I've enjoyed mountaintop experiences with the Lord. I've enjoyed them both inside and outside of church. I've enjoyed mountaintop experiences in revival meetings like we just had. Like some of you got experienced some good mountaintop experiences during our revival meeting that just passed. I've enjoyed mountaintop experiences in regular church services. I remember one time, and they sneak up on you. You can't predict them. You can't schedule them. They come or they don't. And when they come, it's just nice to be there. Went to normal Sunday morning church service one time, Pensacola, Florida, Bible Baptist Church. Brother Mark's cousin, Brother Jim McGahee, when I was there, he was the assistant pastor, and Dr. Ruckman was out of town, and he was preaching that morning, and I remember him up on the platform, and we're in the congregational song service. And they started singing, they had us singing the song they was leading us singing, Heaven Came Down and Glory Filled My Soul. And I'm going to tell you what, you can't make it happen, you can't manufacture it, you can wish it would happen, but it doesn't make it. And suddenly, I'm going to tell you, heaven came down and glory filled our soul. There was something moving spiritually, God in the atmosphere, filling that place. You looked around and people kind of started looking at each other like this, like, I saw Brother McGahee looking around, like, what is going on here? God was showing up in his fullness. He was filling his people and filling his presence in that place. And I got thinking about what might have brought that about later on, and something that occurred to me was that particular Sunday morning service was the first Sunday morning service after the first day of the street preaching season. And we'd been out on the streets on Saturday, and folks, I don't know, just the Lord just chose, we were filled up with him out there, and he chose to fill us up with him in there. And he met with us, and it was a blessing. And if you got to preach after that, it's good. It's a good way to start. You just better hope you can keep it going. But as I remember, we didn't miss anything during the message. All was good. But I remember when it just rolled in there like that. I've enjoyed mountaintop experiences with the Lord in prayer. I've enjoyed mountaintop experiences with the Lord in my Bible. I've enjoyed mountaintop experiences with the Lord witnessing to people. Preaching on the street, sometimes it's turned into a mountaintop experience. Leading someone to the Lord, a great mountaintop experience. I mean, you're like on the mountain and you walk away. I suppose you're going down, but it really doesn't seem like, because it just seems like your feet are not touching the ground sometimes. There's just nothing like it. It's you can't even explain it. It's joy unspeakable and full of glory. Enjoyed mountaintop experiences just singing to the Lord in private. Mountaintop experiences worshiping and praising him on my own. I go to those services in Pensacola when it would get on, and a lot of times, they'd have other people begin excited, shouting God, and it was a good time. And a lot of times I'd just sit there and I just kind of soak it in. I mean, if it needed an amen, I'd have given it. But the amens were being carried. Excitement was being carried. I just kind of just sat there sometimes, and I just soaked it in like that sponge I talked to you about at the end of the morning service this morning. I soaked it all in. And I'm tell you what, though, sometimes I went home and I had my own glory fit. Running around my house in the dark, lifting my hands up, praising God, and then running inside my house on top of my coffee table. And if you're going to do this, you better make sure you got a strong coffee table. And just glory to God, praise Him. I've had times like that, singing and praising and praying and just talking to the Lord and worshiping Him, driving in a car. You got to trust the Lord will take care of you, because you still got to keep your eyes on the road and make sure you're driving properly and straight. But there's nothing like the mountain. The air is clean. The sun is shining brightly and warm. The view is magnificent. And you feel like there's nothing, when you're on that spiritual mountaintop, you feel like there's nothing that can interfere with your love for God and your dedication to Him and your commitment to Him. Matter of fact, on the mountaintop, sometimes it feels like when you think about backsliding or sinning, it's like, why would I ever even want to? If only, I've thought to myself, if only we could bottle that and just keep it to pour it out when we need it, when suddenly we don't feel that way anymore. You know what I realize? We don't have to bottle it because the Lord already bottled it. In His book and in us, His earthen vessels that He is sealed with His Holy Spirit. He's in us. God is in us. It's there. And you can tap into it whenever you want. But there's just nothing like it, just being up on the mountain. And it's like the song says, life is easy when you're up on the mountain. When you've got peace of mind like you've never known. It's just easy. There's just nothing like it. But there are some dangers on the mountaintop. As I said, there's some liabilities. Go with me to Philippians chapter 4. Philippians 4. Paul, expounding on things in Philippians 4, I'm going to be reading in verse 11, where he makes this great statement, saying, "Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned, in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content." That's a great verse to digest all by itself. Let's get more of the context, though. Look at verse 12. "I know both how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me." Now, what I want to point out, first of all here, as we're going through this at this time, I want you to notice in verse number 12, he says, "I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound." To be abased is when you're down. He said, "I know how to deal with that." And he says, that would make sense. But what's really maybe a little bit peculiar about this thing is he says, I know how to abound. I mean, normally you wouldn't think that would be a big deal. I mean, everybody knows how to abound. Like I just got saying, life is easy when you're up on the mountain. I mean, you can just be there all the time. Everything would be good. You'd always have the victory. You'd always be living on the victory side. But it's not always so. There's some pitfalls on the mountain. There's some snares on the mountain. There's some things you got to watch out for when you're on the mountaintop. And Paul said that he had learned these things. He said in verse 12, "I know how to abound." I know both how to be abased. And then he said, "I know how to abound." Now, to abound, that's when you're on top. That's when you're in abundance. That's when the windows of heaven are open and the blessings are falling. When you are hitting on all cylinders and God is there and you know He's there. I mean, He's always there, but sometimes you're just not as aware of it as other times. And he says, "I know how to abound." He knew it because he learned it. That was what verse 11 was about. "Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned." He learned it, and whatsoever state I am therewith to be content. He learned it, and so now in verse 12 he knows it, and in verse 13 he can do it through the power of Jesus Christ. Why did Paul have to learn how to abound? He had to learn how to abound, again, because of the dangers and the pitfalls that are on the mountain. Sometimes when folks get on the mountaintop, they fail to do those things. They fail to continue to do those things that got them to the mountaintop in the first place. And what you need to learn to do and remember to do is remember to do your maintenance on the mountain. You need to learn to do maintenance on the mountain because some folks forget it. I've seen this happen. I've seen it happen years and years and years with people. Sometimes folks live off of the glory that is corporately present when you got a whole bunch of folks together. I've seen it happen at I've seen it happen with revival meetings. I've seen it happen at youth camps. I've seen it happen at Youth Ablaze. Just you get people together and they have that concentrated time with each other. People singing the glory of God. People preaching. They're soaking it all in. But what I have watched so often and too often is they fail to continue to do their spiritual maintenance on the mountain. They just live off of everything that's around them. I've seen it happen to people in the Bible school atmosphere. they're not maintaining their own personal walk with God. They're not maintaining their own spiritual walk. I mean, when you're in a Bible school atmosphere, it can be like a mountaintop experience, I mean, day after day after day in class and everything. But you still got to do your own spiritual maintenance. And I've watched kids go to camp, never pick up their Bible and read it on their own. The time they pick it up is when they have to go to service. And they don't read it on their own, and they don't pray on their own. There's always somebody around. There's always something to do, and they're just hanging around people and talking and just doing whatever. But they don't maintain. It happens all the time because folks don't make it a priority. You need to make it a priority. You're getting external help. That's great, but it's not going to be there when the meeting is over. It's not going to be there when there's no Bible school in session on a particular day. It's not going to be there when you graduate. It's not going to be there when camp is over, when Youth Ablaze is over, when the revival meeting is over. You're going to have to maintain it on your own, but you ought to maintain it while you're there as well. It's just foolish not to. It's dangerous not to. You can be in the midst of a spiritual atmosphere and walking in after the flesh. A strange little statement in the book of Proverbs, where Solomon said, I was almost in all evil in the midst of the congregation and assembly. I mean, he was right there amongst them all with the glory of God presence, and some folks, just on the top side enjoying their own mountaintop, and he was in a mountaintop place, but he wasn't in his own mountaintop. Almost in all evil, and that can happen. You've got to maintain. You need to learn to do maintenance in the mountain. It's easy when you're on the mountaintop. It's easy to think that you've arrived. Some folks do a little bit of maintenance, but you need to make sure that you do all that you need. It's easy to think that you've arrived. It's easy to neglect the good habits and practices that got you there. You're in Philippians chapter 4. Look at chapter 3. Philippians 3. Philippians chapter 3, verse number 12. Here's what you need to remember when you're on the mountaintop. Not as though I had already attained, either were already perfect, but I follow after, if that I may apprehend that for which also I am apprehended of Christ Jesus. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. He said, I haven't got there yet. I haven't attained, verse number 12. I've not gotten it. I haven't apprehended it yet. I'm still pressing toward the mark. And that's what you need to keep on doing. Maintenance on the mountain, pressing toward the mark, recognizing that you haven't attained. You've not arrived. You may be enjoying a good mountaintop experience, but you have not yet arrived. Chapter 12, you haven't apprehended. You have not attained. And that's what you want to remember. When I was at 3 different Bible schools, a year at Hiles Anderson, when I had that year there, we were in the dorm one night, and there was this one time, it was in a nighttime, a friend, I think we went to the same church as some folks that were in our dorm, and he came around, and he came around kind of younger guy, but he was just all excited and mountaintop and shouting, and basically everybody else that wasn't excited to him is, well, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you all excited? Come on, you guys, what is this? And he just was just kind of ignorant, and I'm kind of like just, I'm just kind of watching, listening, and just keeping an even keel. Within a week, the kid quit school, went home. You got to watch it on the mountain. You can be vulnerable on the mountaintop. And so it's not all about just rah, tiskumba for Jesus. You got to maintain yourself on the mountain. I've been in just regular church services, seeing guys shouting the glory of God. And then that's in church on Sunday night, and by Monday and Tuesday, they're ready to throw in the towel. And it's just not all. That's a glorious time, but that's just part of the Christian life. So some folks, again, they'll live off the glory they find in church, and then they don't maintain that glory in their own personal lives. And so the mountaintop is great, enjoy it, but if there's one thing to learn on the mountain, it's to remember to do your maintenance in the mountain. And go ahead and enjoy them, you'll be there. but do your maintenance in the mountain. All right, that's the first one, the mountain. Let's talk about the second one, and that's the valley. That song I started to give you a little while ago, it started out that says life is easy when you're up on the mountain, and you've got peace like you've never known. But when things change and you're down in the valley, don't lose faith, for you're never alone. Because you're not always going to be in the mountaintop. Sometimes you're going to go down to the valley. And the God of the mountain is still God in the valley. That's what that song goes on to say. When things go wrong, he'll make it right. And the God of the good times is still God in the bad times. The God of the day is still God in the night. Song says you talk of faith when you're up on the mountain. But talk comes easy when life's at its best. But it's down in the valley of your trials and temptation. That's when faith is really put to the test. Go back to chapter 4 of Philippians while you're there. Chapter 4. And here's what Paul was saying first in verse 12. I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. So he said, first of all, that he knew how to be abased. Again, this is something he learned in verse 11. Learning whatsoever state he was, therewith to be content. So he learned that, and now he knew how to be abased. What is that? That's, again, when you're down and you're abased, like a basement, down, the cellar, you're getting way down. That's the valley. And folks got to learn how to navigate through the valley. And we tend to think of the valley as bad, but it's not all bad. Some of the most precious, luscious fruit of this earth comes in the valley. Whether you're talking literal fruit that you can eat in your physical mouth or spiritual fruit. Some of you will be familiar with Gail Riplinger's work on New Age Bible versions, and then she's done other work on the King James. And she wrote that out and collated the whole thing while she was just deathly ill for months. And just in her bed, like on her side, and just worked on that and worked on that and worked on that. And it was a valley time, but the Lord used it to bring forth some good fruit. That book's borne a lot of good fruit. As far as fruit on this earth, when I was working at the Roloff Homes in Corpus Christi, occasionally they would bring in boxes of fruit, and as they would say it, they'd bring them in from the valley. And they had place in the Rio Grande Valley where they would bring this stuff in, and good stuff, whether it was grapefruit, oranges, sometimes watermelon, but just good stuff, some luscious fruit. And I guess what happens is the rain comes down and then sweeps the nutrients from the soil and the mountains and the plain, and it all goes down there, and then it all kind of piles up in the valley, and you have this rich, fertile soil, and brings forth good fruit. And God, if you'll let him, and if you'll stay, and this is what you need in the valley, you need to have victory in the valley. That's what Paul said. I know both how to be abased. He learned how to be abased. If you will learn how to be abased, maintain your victory in the valley, you can see some precious fruit brought forth as well. I'll read you a little poem which was written by Ella Wheeler Wilcox. And it was written when she was on the steamer Richard Peck between New Haven and New York, and she wrote it following an observation that her husband made. And what he observed was that one ship went west and another went east with the same wind. And so I wrote this little poem called The Winds of Fate. One ship drives east and another drives west with the self-same winds that blow. 'Tis the set of the sails, and not the gales, which tells them the way to go. Like the winds of the sea are the ways of fate, as we voyage along through life. 'Tis the set of a soul that decides its goal, and not the calm or strife. What's the point? The point is, the winds may blow, but where's your sail set? You set it in the right direction, those winds of the valley will blow you right towards the Lord. The closer walk. Matter of fact, some of the most precious times you'll ever have with the Lord are in the valley. Now look, I never order, when I'm praying and I'm ordering up things like, when I say order, I don't mean I'm ordering God. It's like, well, you place your order and you hope this is what you'll get in prayer. I never order valleys. I never say, Lord, please send me to a valley. And if he wants to send me, I'm going to leave that. That's his business. But I'm not going to ask for it. That's not what I want. I'd rather go up on the mountaintop, spiritually speaking. But when they come, I know he's got a purpose. And some of the greatest fellowship I've ever had with the Lord has been in valleys. What does he say in the book of James? It says, wherefore he giveth more grace. Amen. And he does. And when he gives more grace, he gives more grace when you need it. And when you need that grace, it'll be there. And but what does he do? He resists the proud, gives grace to the humble and to the lowly. And there's times, again, I wouldn't order it, but God knows better. There's times when we need a valley. And so somebody wrote a song about that. He said, when I'm low in spirit, I cry, Lord, lift me up. I want to go higher with thee, but the Lord knows I can't live on the mountain all the time. So he picked out a valley for me. He leads me beside the still waters, somewhere in the valley below. He draws me aside to be tested and tried, but in the valley he restoreth my soul. It's dark as a dungeon, and the sun seldom shines, and I question, Lord, why must this be? Then he tells me there's strength in my sorrow, and there's victory in trials for me. And he leads me beside those still waters. And they're going to test you. He's going to try you. And in the valley, you know what he'll do? He'll restore your soul if you'll let him. Just gotta let him. Gotta trust him. Figure he knows what he's doing. There's a method to the madness that you go through. And God's working to let all things work together for good. Somebody else got a hold of this truth, and they wrote a song thanking the Lord for the valley and said, thank you for the valley I walked through the day. The darker the valley, the brighter the day. And actually, I think I've heard it a couple ways, and one of the other ways is the darker the valley, the more I learn to pray. I found you where the lilies are blooming by the way, and I thank you for the valley I walked through today. You know what we sing? We sing about the lily of the valley, and you know who that lily is? That's Jesus. When you read about that in the Song of Solomon, it doesn't say it like we sing it. We sing that he's the lily of the valley, and he is the lily of the valley, but in the verse it says he's the lily of the valleys, plural. And whenever you need it, whatever valley you're going through, however many you go through, he'll be there. I spent a summer in West Virginia it was before my last year of Bible school, and I was working with some folks that did work at a church there. And I was out one morning praying, driving my car, reading my Bible. I parked in the end of a cemetery, just kind of by a hedgerow, tree row or something like that, and just praying, just some things on my heart, heavy, and lift up my eyes, and what was before me in that row, but a lily. And the Lord just kind of used it as a lily of the valley. It was an encouragement to me. But we need to learn to thank him for these things. And everything give thanks. And so that's what the songwriter said. Thank you for the valley I walked through today. The darker the valley, the more I learn to pray. I found you where the lilies are blooming by the way, and I thank you for the valley I walked through the day. Thank you for every hill I've climbed, for every time the sun didn't shine. Thank you for every lonely night I prayed until I knew that everything was all right. And I thank you for the valley I walked through today. Life can't be all sunshine, or the flowers would die. The rivers would be deserts, all barren and dry. Life can't be all blessing, or there'd be no need to pray. So I thank you for the valley I walked through today. There's another song that says this, that's resonated with me. It's called That's Just His Way of Telling Me He Loves Me. In that song it says, I don't question trials that bring me to my knees. That's just his way of telling me he loves me. Sometimes the Lord brings us along in the valley, restores our soul. He brings us down there because he wants a bit closer fellowship with us. Puts the squeeze on, so we'll cleave to him. What you need to remember to do, maintain yourself, get victory in the valley, and then when you cleave to him in the valley, don't let go of him when you get out of the valley. Because some folks, it's strange. Some folks do good on the mountaintop, not so good in the valley. But other folks do good in the valley and not so good on the mountaintop. And sometimes it's the same people at different times. They do good in the mountaintop, but then when it changes, I guess sometimes we just get used to one thing and then we have trouble with change. But sometimes the thing that keeps you close to the Lord is the valley experience, and then when it's gone, you figure, I take a breather now, I'll catch my breath, and you quit maintaining your walk with the Lord, and that's not what you ought to do by any means. So there's victory in the valley, and valleys are part of life, and there's potential fruit to be brought forth. So get and go for the victory in the valley. The Lord Jesus Christ will give it to you if you let him. So there were, in those verses, we saw the mountain, and then there was the valley, and then number 3, there was also the plain. The plain. Go to 1 Kings chapter 20. 1 Kings 20. And in 1 Kings chapter 20, look at verse 21. 1 Kings 20, verse number 21. And the king of Israel went out and smote the horses and chariots and slew the Syrians with a great slaughter. And the prophet came to the king of Israel and said unto him, Go, strengthen thyself, and mark and see what thou doest. For at the return of the year the king of Syria will come up against thee. And the servants of the king of Syria said unto him, their God, this is a heathen king trying to figure out why they lost in this war here, this battle. And so he tells them, he says, their gods are gods of the hills. Therefore they were stronger than we. But let us fight against them in the plain, and surely we shall be stronger than they. And what they didn't realize was the God that won the victory in the hill would also win the victory in the plain. This was probably the inspiration for that other song that said, the God of the mountain is still God in the valley. But sometimes when your adversary can't defeat you on the mountain, he'll regroup and try to get you in the plain. So what is the plain? Well, it's just plain. It's plain. The plains are plain. No exciting mountains, no even valleys. As much as we dread them spiritually, they can be beautiful in landscape. And there's no beautiful valleys. And the truth of the matter, folks, is most of life is lived in the plain. Most of life is not lived in the mountaintop. Most of life is not lived in the valley. And if you're, and I know there's probably exceptions to that rule, where for some people every day it seems to be a valley, and I feel for them, but that's the exception. In most cases, most lives are lived in the plain. And the plain, it's just easy to get bored. Much of life is just that way. But one needs to learn to be persistent in the plain. Persistent. The plain, again, it's flat land, like the western plains of the United States. No dips, no valleys, no ridges, no hills, no mountains. And if a person's ever lived in a place where there were mountains, a lot of them especially don't like the plain. If they come from a place with mountains and they go to a place with the plain, they'll often comment about it and just say, "Man, there are no mountains there. This is plain. You can stand outside your door and you can see the city 15 miles away because there's nothing interfering on some of those places out west." I was driving out west some years ago to go to Montana. A lot of the places were like that, and you'd encounter some mountains, but there's just a lot of just flat land. And then younger, when we're going to driving through like New Mexico to go to Arizona with my family, just lots of flat land. And on the way to Montana, what I especially noticed was you'd have miles and miles of just barren, boring, like desert flat land, and then suddenly you come upon a city, and it was almost like this city had just been dropped out of nowhere from heaven, just placed right there. You go through that city, and then boom, there's miles and miles of just nothing again. And there's places like that out in the West. And again, especially if you like the mountains and you're used to that, you're not going to like the plain too much. At least a lot of folks are like that. I remember back in the day, I haven't heard for a while, but I used to hear people complain about Lockport that way, about no mountains, just a lot of flat land and so forth. But there's a lot worse places than Lockport for just flat land and plain type living. At least we've got the escarpment, and you can drive just a few short minutes from where we are right now to Outwater Park, for example, and you can get some awesome views of the escarpment. You can also drive if you go out the church parking lot, turn left, and you go down till you come to what's called Ernest Road, and you turn down Ernest Road, it'll turn into what's called Day Road. You go right down Day Road. If you cross over, it'll cross over Route 31, also AKA Rochester Road, and it'll take you down a hill. And when we first moved here, we first lived with a brother for about 2 months, rented out his basement. Brother Steve Weesey, Brother Bear's mentioning him the other night. He was one of the guys that was on the ship with him in Jacksonville area. And he was living up here. And then we got an apartment, which was a garage apartment, an apartment over the top of a garage on Day Road. And so almost every day, we could drive down that road, Mrs. Strobel and I, and we would come, and as we would head down the hill for our apartment, I mean, it was a pretty good, significant dip, and it's still there. You can drive today, but just some beautiful views heading out toward the lake, looking out that way. And there's some beautiful views around here. Again, we could do a lot worse for even landscaping than Lockport in this area. Many years ago now, one of the men from our church who was here at the time, he wanted to take me somewhere and show me something. And so we got in the vehicle, and I'm like, yeah, what are we going to do? And he's like, oh, well, kind of like, you'll see. And he drove me out to Outwater Park to a place. And we stopped at a spot. We got out, stopped at a spot, walking about where there's a little clearing set for a view of the escarpment. And he told me that that was the spot where the hymn, This Is My Father's World, was written. Now, whether that was the exact spot or not, I'm not sure. But this is what I would have discovered afterwards. I discovered that the author of that hymn, whose name is Maltby Babcock, he was the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Lockport in the latter part of the 1800s. And if you were to Google, if you Google, This Is My Father's World, and then put those words and then put the word hymn time, all one word, HYMNTIME, and you Google it, the first result that you get, if you click on that, it should take you to a page that gives you a little bit, it gives you the words of that and gives you a little explanation about the background for the song. And I'll just read you what it says there about the song's origin. While a pastor in Lockport, New York, Babcock liked to hike in an area called the Escarpment, an ancient upthrust ledge near Lockport. It has a marvelous view of farms, orchards, and Lake Ontario, about 15 miles distant. It is said those walks in the woods inspired these lyrics for this song, and the title of it recalls an expression that Babcock used when starting a walk, because he liked to say this: "I'm going out to see my Father's world." Amen. And so he wrote, "This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world, I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world, the birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declares their Maker's praise. This is my Father's world, he shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass I hear him pass, he speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's world, oh let me ne'er forget, that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world, the battle is not done. Jesus who died shall be satisfied, and earth and heaven be one. Those are usually the verses that you find in a hymnal, but there are lots more verses to it. Lots. One time, I think it might have been on the anniversary of his death or something. We got something in the mail that had just a bunch of verses, and it's been a while ago, and I don't know where that is right now, but I do know on that website I talked about they had some additional verses. I'm gonna read you 3 more additional verses that are on that site that you may or may not have come across in your own studies or readings. This is my Father's world. Dreaming, I see his face. I ope my eyes and in glad surprise cry, the Lord is in this place. This is my Father's world from the shining courts above. The beloved one, his only Son, came, a pledge of deathless love. This is my Father's world. Should my heart be ever sad? The Lord is King. Let the heavens ring. God reigns. Let the earth be glad. This is my Father's world, now closer to heaven bound. For dear to God in the earth is the earth Christ trod, no place but his holy ground. This is my Father's world. I walk a desert lone. In a bush ablaze, to my wondering gaze, God makes his glory known. This is my Father's world. A wanderer I may roam. Whate'er my lot, it matters not. My heart is still at home. Hey, you know what? That's some people might call this the plain where we're at here. It's plain, nothing real special about it. But one needs to learn to thrive in the plains of life, because that's where he's going to spend most of his life. In those long stretches of the flat lands of life. Again, as I said, most life tends to be this way. So, somewhat tedious and maybe even a bit too boring for our liking. But hey, look, we're not in heaven yet, and that's just life. That's just life. In the Second Gulf War, many of you know Brother Dave Andres. You remember that name, and his son Davey was in the Navy. I just thought, how about that? That rhymed. Davey Andres was in the Navy, and in the Second Gulf War, I remember hearing a story about them when that time came. They were actually training dolphins to locate mines. I thought it was an interesting story. They're using dolphins to help them locate mines to keep people safe from getting blown up. And little Davey Andres, who wasn't that little anymore, he was on a ship that was doing that. And I thought, man, how exciting. And Dave was telling me about it, and I was talking about, man, that's cool, I heard about it. And David said to me, his dad, he said that his son said, well, it's really mostly pretty boring most of the time. I'm thinking about that. I think, you know what? In war, boring is not a bad thing. I mean, that's boring. Let the dolphins go out and find the mines. You're not getting shot at. You're not getting blown up. You're not running into the mines yourself. I'll take boring sometimes. I mean, I've been in the spiritual warfare where the spiritual fiery darts are flying, where you got to take cover because there's munitions being blown up on every side of you. You're going to crawl under the covers, just cover your head and pray, okay, God, keep me safe till the storm passes by. And you know what I like after that? I like some boring. It isn't bad at all. But you gotta learn to press on in the plain and be persistent in the plain. Don't be tempted to depart into sin because you're craving something more exciting. It's not going to be exciting when you're reaping for what you've sown. It won't be exciting then. So we live a lot of our life in the plain, and all that being true, and it is, sometimes God's going to call you to leave the plain and go back up into the mountain, where we started talking about. Consider Isaiah 40 and verse number 9. O Zion, that bringest good tidings, get thee up into the high mountain. O Jerusalem, that bringest good tidings, lift up thy voice with strength. Lift it up, be not afraid. Say unto the cities of Judah, behold your God. Sometimes the Lord's going to tell you to just get out from the plain and get up to the mountain. Here's Genesis 19, verse 17. And it came to pass when they had brought them forth abroad that he said, escape for thy life. Look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. He's talking to Lot now. He said, escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. Sometimes you're going to have to just leave that plain, get up to the mountain. Sometimes you need to get out of that plain and just and do your best to get up into the mountain. Say, how do I do that? Well, extra seeking of God, extra prayer, maybe some prayer and fasting, but get up into the mountain. Now, again, that being said, we love the mountaintop experiences, but most likely you're going to come back down to the plain, spend some time in the valley, but again, most of the time in the plain, and that's just the way it goes. Miss Geiger sent me something the other day, kind of a little graphic, which doesn't have a picture in it, but it had a quote in it, white letters, a deep blue background that she forwarded to me, and it's very appropriate for what I'm talking about right now. And here's what it said. This kind of contrasts, this whole thought about the mountain and the plain and the importance of, we sometimes put more importance on the mountain, but they're both important. And it said this, bringing down the walls of Jericho involved more walking than shouting. You remember what the Lord had him do? He had him walk around that thing day after day for 6 days, and on the seventh day they went around 7 times, and then the seventh time they shouted. So it's like, 13 times walking, and then one shout. And so bringing down the walls of Jericho involved more walking than shouting. A Sunday shout is great, but it can't replace a daily walk. Now look, we need all of the above. We need that Sunday shout. And we need that Wednesday shout. And we need that revival meeting shout. That's why we have all this. But again, most of our lives aren't lived in the short time that we spend in church on Sundays, Wednesdays, and occasional revival meetings. Most of our lives are lived outside of church, and a lot of that is in the plain. Just the plain, the flat land of life. And what you need is that daily walk with the Lord in the plain. Along with the shouts of the revival meetings, you need that daily walk. And along with the regular church services, you need that daily walk. That's where you're going to spend most of your life. If you're not feeding yourself out there, you're going to go hungry, and you're going to get weak, and you're not going to be able to maintain yourself. As a pastor through the years, it's been amazing to me the varieties of people and the varieties of approaches that God's people take to all these type of things. And you just see it. It's just so strange how different they do this, and sometimes it's just anything but just getting all in. Some folks make the concerted effort to come to the revival meeting, but then they fail to make that same concerted effort to come to regular church outside the revival meeting. I'm talking even about our regular folks, some of our folks. Some folks make a concerted effort to come to regular church services through the years, but they don't make the concerted same effort to come to revival meeting services. So you get some on one side, some on the other. Some folks don't make much of any concerted effort to come to church regularly to any church services. There's some people like that. Some folks come to church, but they have no daily walk with the Lord. And then you got other folks who have a daily walk with the Lord, but they don't come to church. You've got to get the balance. You've got to have a walk with the Lord, and the Lord wants you to come to church. This is why we're here. This is part of what we do. Going to church, look, it's not just about you. It's about the people that you affect while you're here. It's about even more than that. It's about obedience to God. And so look, this is what the Lord would have us to do. And I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir. It's Sunday night, but it's nice to be the choir sometimes when the preacher's preaching, isn't it? I'm afraid we've all become our own little G gods, and we're going to tell God how it goes, and we're not going to let Him tell us how it goes. We're going to call the shots our way instead of submitting ourselves to God and doing it His way. Let's wrap it up. I'll give you a couple things as we close. Isaiah 40. I'll have you turn to this one. Isaiah 40. And verse number 4. Isaiah 40, verse number 4, says, and this also has all three of those words that we've been talking about tonight. Although the one arguably isn't exactly the same sense, but it'll work. Isaiah 40, verse 4, every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. Now, in case you don't understand the context, this is all a good thing. This is what the Lord's going to do. Look at verse 5. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. That's what the Lord's going to do when He comes and He sets things straight during the millennial reign. Of course, that'll transfer to the new heavens and the new earth. But at that time, the valleys are going to be exalted. So we take this as spiritually and apply it. Your valleys are going to be exalted. You're not going to have to go through the valleys. But He talks about those mountains. They're also going to be brought low. And then the rough places are going to be made plain. That rough terrain is going to be made plain. That's one nice thing about the plain. Not a lot of rocks under your feet and so forth. Just kind of good flat land, easy terrain to navigate. And this is really a good picture on a spiritual sense of kind of how you want to get to in your Christian life. You want things to balance out. Seemed like early on, my highs were way high and my lows were way low. And I still enjoy the mountaintop experience, and I still go through valleys, but it's like the valleys aren't so low anymore. And the mountaintop experiences are good, but I don't know, they're just not, they're not as high to the place where I'm going to crash down anymore. Maybe as you grow, you live closer to the mountaintop. So it's not such a distance when you come down to what has become the plain, normal, everyday living. I think that's kind of how we ought to get to. The balance where the lows are not too low, the highs not too high, there's stability. And this is what I think the Lord gets at in the other verse I want to tell you about. And I'll just read it for you. 1 Peter 5:10 says, But the God of all grace who hath called us unto his eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after that ye have suffered a while, make you perfect, establish, strengthen, settle you. And that's what you've got to get. Got to get settled. You just got to get settled. Settled in the Lord, settled in your walk with him, settled with your eyes upon Jesus, settled with your gaze on things above and your affection set there, and learn to maintain yourself. Mountaintop, learn maintenance in the mountain. Again, it's easy to think you've arrived there and then neglect the good habits that helped you get there and allowed you to get there in the first place. In the valley, don't give up. Press on. Get victory in the valley. It's easy to get discouraged there. And then be persistent in the plain. It's easy to get bored. Again, you just spend so much time there, it's like, oh, everything looks the same. Well, you just be persistent. So you're going to be in the mountain, maintain yourself. You're going to be in the valley. There's victory there. And you're going to be in the plain. Just press on, and God will get you through something exciting when it's time to have more excitement. But as you plug into him, I mean, look, even the plain can be exciting. And the boring can bring joy to your soul, especially if you've been having spiritual bullets fly at you, fiery darts and so forth. But that's life, folks. That's life. So get the victory. Learn how to be abased. Learn how to abound. And press on toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. Let's pray. Lord, I do thank you for all your lessons in the Scriptures, and teach us, I pray, to be strong in thee, in the power of thy might. Give us wisdom. Help us not to be stubborn. Help us not to get mad, Lord, when you call us out from your word, or we're called out, Lord, in the preaching. Help us to face it. Help us, Lord, to be honest. Help us to grow. Talked about that again this morning, Lord. We're always supposed to be growing as Christians. Help us to do that, and teach us, Lord, to navigate all these different areas, this different spiritual terrain that we'll encounter in life, and to be giving you the glory through it all, whatever state we're in. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's take a little bit of time and have the music play, and take time to pray. Thank you, Lord, for a good time in church, Lord, this morning and tonight. And I pray you'd help us to be able to go away and meditate on these things, Lord. Bring them to our own mind when we need them, and help us just to press on, Lord. You're good all the time, and I know that you know what you're doing. So help us, Lord, to walk in the Spirit, walk in tune with you, and just walk by faith, not by sight. Give us, Lord, that victory. Help us to maintain ourselves, and help us just press on and be persistent in all that you have for us to do. I know, Lord, it'll come soon enough when life on earth is over and we're home to heaven. So help us, Lord, to make the best use of this time, redeeming it, and work, Lord, because the night is coming. In Jesus' name, amen.